This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by Assemblymember Jessica González-Rojas, a Queens Democrat who is a member of the informal Legislative Mom Squad and also chair of the formal Assembly Task Force on Women's Issues, and is here to talk about some of the budget priorities of the task force. Thanks for making the time, Assemblymember.
Thank you, David, for having me.
Well, I guess for starters, I'm curious, how do you think the state is currently doing in funding and prioritizing issues particularly relevant to the lives of women in New York?
Well, I think we've had some big victories in terms of universal childcare and the advancements and investments that we're making. Part of the Mom Squad has been coined by Assemblymember Sarah Clark when we were fighting for universal school meals and for universal childcare and other programs that particularly impact women and families. So we made some major strides. We are ahead in the nation in reproductive rights issues. We do have some asks as part of the Task Force on Women's Issues to continue to invest and expand our access to reproductive health services. But overall, I think we're in a good place. I just think that in this affordability crisis, we need to make sure we're making the investments to make lives as easy as possible on women and families as life has become so difficult for so many of us.
Well, to that end, you're looking for an additional $30 million for the Women, Infants, and Children Supplemental Nutrition Program, which people might know as WIC, which helps feed pregnant women plus a year after birth, as well as kids under the age of 5. Is this about expanding the available benefits so that people get more money, or is this about increasing the eligibility threshold so that more women are captured by this?
Actually, the state investment is really in the infrastructure.
Okay.
We want to make sure that our WIC offices are well-staffed, that they have outreach coordinators. As we're seeing cuts on SNAP, and that's something I've been fighting against, all these cuts and attacks on the SNAP program, WIC has been relatively untouched. And again, this is a federal program where the state makes investments on our end. But these are programs that continue to help undocumented families, immigrant families, and the eligibility has still been unchanged. So our goal is to make investments in the infrastructure so that the offices are well staffed, the technology is there, and that there's outreach coordinators, because we're missing so many people who are eligible, who could be in the program, that are falling through the cracks. So the $30 million is really about that infrastructure piece and the outreach piece that is vital to make sure people are in the program, particularly when they're losing program and funding through SNAP.
If you do, though, cast a wider net, is this a program where more dollars will be available, or is this sort of a zero-sum game where if you try to bring in more people, it's just going to be less of a pie to go around?
No, we have the resources for it. We just need to make sure people know that they're eligible and that this program exists, and that's why the coordinators are really important, and that's part of the $30 million investment. And again, so far it's been untouched by the federal government. We want to maintain that, and it's reaching communities that have been excluded from the SNAP program. So we want to capture those folks and make sure that they're cared for.
So another issue that is one of your priorities might not necessarily seem on its face to be a women's issue, but you're looking for basically age parity when it comes to pension tiers so that people who've been hired in the last, nearly 2 decades in tiers 5 and 6 could retire at the same age as those in tier 4. So that's, instead of retiring at 63, you're retiring at 55 if you've got 30 years of service. You've targeted this as a $600 million annual investment, although I think that just refers to teachers, doesn't capture the public sector workforce at the state level and at local governments. Why do you view this as unique to women in terms of an issue that they care about?
This has been really interesting because working with the New York State United Teachers Union and UFT, they've really highlighted this as a women's issue. Teachers, it's very much a feminized field, and we're seeing those folks who are in the program and have the inequity in the parity. So we have teachers who are tier 4, we have teachers who are tier 6, and there's inequities in the time of service and the ability to retire at 55 versus 63. And because often many of them may take time off to have a child, raise a family, they're losing some of those years of service too. So we're losing teachers. We desperately need them. I just met with a group of paraprofessionals yesterday that are also underpaid and are facing these tier 6 limitations. So we want to make sure we're bringing more teachers into the workforce with the school mandates around class size. We're going to need more teachers. So we are really looking at this through the angle of women's issues because of the feminization of that workforce. And many public sector workers are women as well. So this has been an exciting analysis that we bring. I always argue that there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. So I can argue a lot of things are women's issues or reproductive justice issues or economic justice issues. But this angle has been particularly important because it's been in partnership with the teachers' unions. And again, they're a very feminized workforce that are on the front lines of fighting for changes to Tier 6.
So the example, though, that you bring up, this idea of not getting service time because you might take a leave of absence to raise a child for some period of time, why not simply address that issue specifically and say you can get credit for that or you can buy credit for that? Why take what some might perceive as a sledgehammer response to something that could be solved with a scalpel?
Well, this is a huge issue for public sector workers overall. The shift from 55 to 63 is an 8-year difference.
Sure.
And I met with people that work here in the assembly that said, I am a Tier 6 employee. My husband's a Tier 4 employee. He gets to retire and I have to work an additional 8 years. And that inequity just feels really unjust. And we're seeing that across the public sector workforce. I'm Tier 6. I'm going to have to work till 63 in order to get my pension without penalty. So, I think as an issue writ large, the public sector workforce is fighting to amend this. But I really appreciate looking at it through the angle of a women's issue because it's really critical to recognize the disparities in the workforce and how women often are overrepresented in these industries.
Well, lastly, on this point, the overall quote-unquote Fix Tier 6 campaign has a number of other changes they want to see. You've singled out, though, this one thing, the retirement age. Does that mean that is the priority for the task force, or would you like to see all of the elements from a women's issue? And that includes changing the contribution rate as well as doing some things to the payouts in the future.
I mean, we'd love to see the entirety of the fixes. We recognize that we won't get that all at once. We might have to look at a tiered approach to making these amendments. Again, working with the teachers union, this was their priority around the age differential. So we decided to target that. But as a Tier 6 employee and someone who's advocating for an equitable pension system, I want to see the full changes happen sooner than later.
And throughout the entire public sector workforce,
Yes.
not just limited to
Yes,
teachers,
exactly.
which would have a price tag well above $600 million,
Yes.
but worth it from your eyes.
Yes, absolutely. But as part of the task force, we're presenting this through the lens of teachers and educators.
So I want to turn to a recurring issue when we talk about women's issues, and that has to do with the reproductive health demands that women might have and just living in this world. What are you looking for on that front, either in terms of contraception access or abortion rights? Anything new or just a continuation of some of the ongoing efforts?
Some of this is a continuation. As you know, Roe v. Wade fell just a number of years ago. I had the Reproductive Freedom and Equity Fund Act introduced, and we were able to get it codified in the budget. Now we have to continue to fight for funding for that. So this year, the governor put in $20 million. We're looking to get to $25 million. The Senate put in $5 million. The Assembly didn't, but it's a three-way agreement, so we're hoping we'll get to that $25 million. We also want to make sure that we're getting medication abortion into the clinics and into the hands of those that need it. And with Medicaid attacking reproductive health care and access to reproductive health care, that's been a huge issue. So we want to make sure that there's funding and resources to ensure that our clinics have access to medication abortion, which is a very effective form of abortion care between a certain period of time of a pregnancy.
I want to highlight an issue that was part of the governor's budget last year, but was not actually on this list, and that has to do with a proposal that was known as baby bucks. It took, I think, a different name when it finally made it into the governor's budget proposal, and this is designed to give some infusion of cash to those really on the lowest income threshold after they have a child. It's being rolled out now. Is that an area where you think there should be additional investment? Because in terms of the number of families that qualify for this on Medicaid, it is a very tiny fraction. So how do you think about that, and how come it didn't make the cut this go around?
Yeah, we that was a big priority last year, and I want to commend again Sarah Clark, who's champion of the Mom Squad. She's really fought for that, and we were very hopeful we'd get the full program that was in her legislation,
Which you co-sponsored.
which I co-sponsored and fought for. And unfortunately, we got a program, and we got something to get started. We do want to advance the full program that Assemblymember Clark is pushing for, but we just had so many priorities this year. But we will certainly continue to advocate and push for that, because I think we'll see a lot of success from this small program. But again, the scope must be expanded, and the actual specifics of the program we want to amend as well.
You're also looking to address homelessness and specifically the idea of family homelessness, which is really a crisis throughout the Big Apple. Yeah. What are you looking for there? Because it's not necessarily a big chunk of change compared to the whole budget.
Yeah, there's an amazing organization called Women in Need that specifically work with homeless women and families. We're just asking for $200,000. This is more of a targeted ask, but because they specifically work with women and families who are in need and need access to homeless shelter, but also services and resources to get them into society and be able to contribute to society. That's a really critical investment, and it's so tiny in the span of the 260 billion plus budget that is before us. So we're hoping there be investments in some of the specific organizations that do this work on the ground, serve those communities, and have been very effective in doing so. So this is a small ask. There's many other organizations across the state, but this is one that came to us with that ask for investments.
Yeah, I mean, in general, with that same theme, do you feel like the governor has prioritized homeless families who might be homeless because of domestic violence enough lately, or have there been a lot of opportunities to do a lot more?
Well, one thing we also asked for, not in this letter from the task force, but separately, I've been working with groups of organizations that work with culturally specific domestic violence programs, and we wanted to get also about $30 million for them. So we're looking for different ways to support communities that are in need, either through domestic violence issues, gender-based violence issues, homelessness. So those investments are really critical. We want to make sure the Office of Victim Services is well funded to make sure that funding goes out to those communities. But the culturally specific part is really important because, again, as our immigrant communities are under attack, those that have different language needs, we want to make sure we're making those investments in the organizations that can address and serve those communities in a culturally competent and a linguistically appropriate way.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Jessica González-Rojas. She's a Queens Democrat and chair of the Assembly's Task Force on Women's Issues. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, David.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.